Order. Hearing is now resumed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. My name is Don Rosenblum. I appear on behalf of Area D Gillnet, Area B Sainer. Mr. Commissioner, I indicated to Commission Council some time ago that I would be approximately 50 minutes in connection with this panel. However, there has been a controversy, let me put it that way, over the issue that Commission Council has chosen not to file the will says in respect to this panel as a way of resolving that issue, because I wanted to expedite this process by simply filing those will says as we have done with certain of the other sectors within this inquiry. As the modus operandi of this particular council is not to file it. He has afforded me the additional time of approximately 20 minutes to put certain paragraphs of the will say to these witnesses so that they might adopt those paragraphs and it becomes part of the evidentiary base of these proceedings. So, in short, I have 50 minutes plus I will tag on additional minutes with the agreement of Commission Council so that the evidence on will says is put before the Commission. But if you, Mr. Commissioner, are of the opinion that the will say should be filed, I would strongly, obviously, support that direction because it speeds up this process.
Mr. Commissioner, the reason I had suggested Mr. Rosenblum take the conventional approach of asking witnesses questions instead of relying on a document that they didn't prepare is that I actually viewed that, although it takes 20 more minutes, as being more efficient than having what I'm aware of is a dispute or some other issue that will involve Canada and perhaps other participants on the question of these will says. I'm not actually convinced that is a more efficient course to have them filed as such. That's the reason for taking the position on that particular question.
I just have two brief comments, Mr. Rosenblum. One is I don't want to interfere in this particular issue because I'm not familiar with why in this particular circumstance the will says were not filed, so I won't go there. And the other thing is I just want to be sure I'm taking the confidence of Commission Council. We have the breathing room to allow an extra 20 minutes.
Yes, I forgot to say that, but that's quite right. In my calculation of today's time, we do have that where that extra time I wouldn't offer it otherwise, so that even with the 20 minutes, I think we're on track to conclude this evidence today. All right.
Thank you very much. It is 10 minutes to noon as I commence this cross-examination. Firstly, panel, I want to solicit from all three of you response to a certain paragraph within the PPR, that of course being PPR number 8. Mr. Harrison delivered a question to you early on this morning in his examination, similar to what I'm asking, but not framed quite the way that I wish it for the record in these proceedings. I want to draw to your attention in the PPR paragraph number 6, and if it could be put on the screen. And I'm going to read this paragraph to you and seek your comment on it. It reads, loss of fish habitat has been identified as a leading factor in the decline of Canada's fisheries resources, and salmon in particular. And what's footnoted there is the Pierce report. Do you, each of you, adopt that statement from the PPR, or more to the point from Dr. Pierce's report? Maybe I'll start with Mr. Wang.
I object to that question. It's unclear to me what's being asked, Mr. Commissioner.
I have trouble understanding why my learned friend is confused about what I'm asking. I'm asking
well,
whether
I don't know whether
not
he's asking about what's in the Pierce document that's footnoted there. And I don't know whether that Pierce document is an exhibit or whether it should be. Or whether he's asking a different question. I don't understand his question.
Well, forgive me, I'm not asking for adoption of the Pierce report in total. I'm asking simply whether you agree with the statement as found in the PPR, paragraph 6, loss of fish habitat has been identified as a leading factor in the decline of Canada's fishery resources and salmon in particular. If I may go from my left to right in the panel, Mr. Wang.
Well, I guess my short answer to that would be I would agree in general with that point. I'm not really in a position to comment with authority on the particular effect that the habitat changes and declines is having on the productivity of salmon. So to what extent habitat changes have contributed to salmon population declines, I don't know. I can say that habitat is changing for the negative. I would presume that because habitat has a notable bearing on the ability of the ecosystem to produce fish, that it's having some effect, but how that interplays with things like ocean survival, changes in the way fisheries are managed and things like that as they relate to salmon productivity, I don't really know how that all plays together.
Thank you. Ms. Reid.
Yeah, I don't have any particular comment. I accept that that's what Dr. Pierce said, and I don't object to it.
Thank you. And Monsieur Leblanc.
Same comment here.
Thank you. Going on with that paragraph from the PPR, in the lower Fraser River watershed, approximately 90% of the fish habitat was lost during the 20th century. Again, in the same order, do you have any reason to dispute what is stated in that PPR?
Could you just scroll down so I can see the footnote reference number 7 there?
Thank you.
I have no particular reason to dispute that. It's not something that I'm personally aware of in terms of these studies.
Thank you.
I have no reason to dispute it.
Thank you. Ms. Reid.
Yeah, I accept it as a technical document that it is.
Sorry,
Same here.
Excuse me, I'm not asking whether you accept it as a technical document. I'm asking you, from your knowledge in your position with DFO, you generally accept that statement that approximately 90% of the fish habitat was lost during the 20th century.
I guess what I'm saying is that from my position, I take scientific advice, and I recognize that the footnote as a scientifically technical document that's been peer reviewed, and I accept the findings of that document.
Thank you. Monsieur Leblanc.
Same here. I accept the findings of that document, given it Dr. Colin Levings.
Lastly, in that sentence from the PPR, I quote, "The people of British Columbia are increasingly concerned about the rate of habitat degradation and loss." Comment.
Mr. Commissioner, I guess I got a broader objection to this question because I object to the sentence. Really, my objection is to the PPR itself. It doesn't seem to me that the PPR is the proper place for a sentence like that. I suppose if the witnesses want to get into what the people of British Columbia are concerned about, maybe they can do that, and that'll create an evidentiary foundation. But I was surprised to see this sentence, and it doesn't seem to me to be an appropriate one for a PPR.
I also object to the PPR. This is and I know it's an exhibit, this is an example of where the PPRs are stated to be statements of fact that are not controversial. And I'm not speaking to this particular statement as such, but that sentence is a value-laden judgment that someone may conclude, but it's certainly not a non-controversial statement of fact. The citation that's given for that are the submissions that were made before yourself, Mr. Commissioner, which I don't know the number, but it would be, tens or so, or maybe 100 or so people that would have said that. I think that sentence is probably something that in the first go is best left for you to deal with eventually when it comes to report writing. But shouldn't be in a PPR, I don't think. With that, and moving to Mr. Rosenblum's questions, it certainly seems that this panel is not in a position to be giving an assessment of what the people of British Columbia do or don't think. They probably have their own views, and they probably know what their neighbors and colleagues and so forth think, but they're not pollsters that can speak to the population's view.
I'm in your hands, Mr. Commissioner. I think it's a trite proposition. In any event, in a final submission, one can refer to the submissions that were made to you at the public hearing process and to make that argument, so I don't want to waste a lot of time. Thank you. I now want to go to the issue of stewardship, and I want to try to get from you, and if you are not in a position to give me this evidence, I'm going to be asking the Commission where this evidence can be obtained. I am informed that there was a major stewardship program initiated by DFO between 1998 and 2003 called the Habitat and Conservation and Stewardship Program. Let's stop there for a moment. Are all three of you familiar with that program? First of all, Monsieur Leblanc?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Reid?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Wang?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I am informed, and forgive me for being so simplistic about this, but that this is a program, or was a program, where DFO would fund various nonprofits, NGOs, to participate or carry out various habitat initiatives within their local watersheds. Am I correct in my general summary of the program?
That's a reasonable general summary. It was a little bit broader reaching than that, but that's reasonable.
All right. And I am informed that there was significant federal money that was pumped into this program, maybe to the tune of approximately $100 million. Is that correct? Give or take.
So just for clarification, the whole program value was $400 million, and that was broken into a number of different programs, partly a licensed retirement program. There was the stewardship component. There were some other elements. I'd have to look up how much money was actually put into this particular program, but I don't think it was $100 million.
All right. Let us say at least over $50 million. But,
Is it possible to get back to you on that?
yes, very much
Okay.
so. Very much so. So it forms part of the record. And as I understand it, this program between 1998 and 2003 was terminated by the federal government, by DFO.
So that was it was a sunset program. It was intended to have a certain time period, and that time period ended. Yes.
All right. And let's help the Commission by putting that program in the context of something else I'm informed about. And that is that there was a previous program on stewardship initiated by DFO with community groups called the Green Stewardship Program. Are you all familiar with that?
Are you referring to
let
the-
me put years to it, 1991 to 97.
Is that the Fraser River Green Plan? I think that would
Yes.
be how I know it.
Yes?
I'm familiar with it to some degree.
All right. And appreciate some of you came on the scene subsequent to that. Ms. Reid?
Not particularly. I'm aware that there was a green plan, but not the particulars of it.
Fair enough. And Monsieur Leblanc?
Same here. I was aware there was a green plan, but not
All right.
specific.
So, and I'm further informed there's a third stewardship plan that was ongoing during this period called the Habitat Action Plan between 96 and 97, just for the Fraser Basin. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure.
All right. Any of you sure?
I'm not aware of that
All right.
program.
And you are not either, Mr. LeBlanc, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, so is it fair to say that the Commission is left with evidence now that there was a stewardship program, at least one program, in existence from approximately 1991 to 2003?
I'm going to simply raise a technical objection, which is asking a question about what the Commission has evidence on isn't appropriate. Asking the question is fine.
Indeed, quite correct. My question is it your evidence, to the best of your knowledge, that there were DFO programs of stewardship from approximately 1991 to 2003?
Well, the witnesses, as I heard them, knew about the first of the three that Mr. Rosenblum referred to, and Mr. Wong knew something about the Fraser Green Plan, and the other two didn't, and none of them knew about the one in the middle there. I think their evidence speaks for themselves. I don't know why he needs to ask if it's fair to say X and Y, but when he does say X and Y, it doesn't seem to be a reflection of what their evidence is.
Well, I don't agree with my friend, but I can move on because their evidence is stated as to their level of knowledge of these programs. Would you also agree with me that during the period of the Habitat Conservation Stewardship Program that all three of you are familiar with, the province also had a complementary program, including one on urban development, urban stewardship, and also forestry and watershed. There was significant provincial money also pumped in to stewardship initiatives. Any of you want to answer that?
I do recall there were provincial programs. The one that, at the top of my head, is the Watershed Restoration Program, and I think there was an urban one, but I can't remember the name of it right now.
Yes. And are you aware whether significant provincial money was pumped into these programs? I will tender evidence in due course about this, but that it was in the vicinity of $200 million.
I couldn't comment specifically on the number, but I would frame it as significant as I recall it.
That it was or wasn't?
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. And would you also agree with me that that program was also terminated by the province around 2003?
It was, and I think as I understand it, but I would defer to somebody from the province to explain the mechanics behind it. What I understand happened is there was a bit of a transformation in terms of how they use that money, and they started something new that turned into what I think is currently called a forest investment account or something like that. So there are other mechanisms in place to achieve some of those objectives, but I'm sort of on the fringe of my knowledge here.
And I appreciate you don't speak for the province. Let me carry on. You therefore agree that since 2003, there has been no DFO stewardship program. Is that fair to say?
I don't agree with that.
Yes.
We have a continuing program under the Salmon Audit Enhancement Program. So that's a $27 million program funded, annual funding, and a portion of that is directed towards stewardship type activities and providing funds to community groups.
What portion of that 27 million, approximately?
Let's say 19. It's around $2 to $3 million.
2 to 3 million.
Yes.
And so is it your evidence that since 2003, only $2 to $3 million for that entire period or per annum have been allocated for stewardship?
Per annum. That's just one program. There are a number of smaller community or stewardship type programs that occur in the different programs. And similarly, under the Species at Risk program, which is led by Environment Canada, but DFO also has a component of that, there's a stewardship program that goes with that as well. So there's a number of smaller stewardship type initiatives that have gone on since 2003.
But you would agree with me, Ms. Reid, that the monies allocated for stewardship since 2003 is minimal compared to the program that was in place between 1998 and 2003.
I mean, I would agree that with the sunsetting of the Green Plan and the HCSP, the amount of money available for stewardship has gone down significantly, yes.
And to that very issue, I want to refer you to a document that we have given notice about that we wanted to tender in these proceedings, which is it has a CAN number 035811. It's number 3 on our list, called Reality Stewardship: Survival of the Fittest for Community Salmon Groups. It is authored by Brian Harvey and David Greer. It is a report to the Vancouver Foundation and the Pacific Fisheries Resource Council. And we have it in PDF, and I believe it is now before you. I want to try to get through this quickly. This document is, this document was as I say, a 2004 document. And I want to go to the executive summary, and I want your comments whether you agree with the authors as they say the following. Under, at page 1, executive summary that's before you now, the top paragraph, and I quote.
Sorry, we're just looking for it on
Yeah.
paper here.
Tell me when you're ready. Are you ready? Thank you. You are or you're not?
Too many books, sorry.
No problem. Okay. It's also on your screen for whatever that's worth. It reads under executive summary, over the past decade, governments at the federal and provincial levels have encouraged BC communities to get involved in salmon habitat stewardship. Until very recently, governments provided many funding and technical support programs. But as this report is written, which is 2004, that funding has largely dried up and the salmon are little better off than they were a decade ago, and many community groups can be excused for feeling that the rug has been pulled out from under them. The disappearance of HRSEP, HCSP, forest renewal, and fishery renewal represent a loss of approximately $66 million in annual funding for salmon stewardship almost overnight. If the budgets of the habitat biologists and engineers at DFO continue to decrease, what has devolution really achieved beyond a short-term frenzy of activity, the rise and fall of some local organizations, and the gutting of DFO's own programs and funding? Unquote. Your comments to that paragraph. Do you generally agree with the authors and their perception of what has unfolded with respect to the stewardship program or programs? I'll go in from Mr. Wang first.
Well, I think similar to what Rebecca said and what has been explained, there's no question there's been a reduction in resources available for stewardship groups in the province. I'm not sure I understand in this piece of evidence here the word devolution. And I think the impression here is that there's been some transformation with an expectation that something that was changed has been lost. And I'm not trying to say it's wrong. I just don't understand the rest of the context where the authors are coming from here. So it probably warrants some further discussion to understand that point.
Ms. Reid?
I don't disagree that there has been a significant loss of funding for stewardship type programs, but I don't agree with the overall perspective of that paragraph in that you've gone from something to nothing. I think that there were some legacy benefits from those stewardship programs which continue on today, albeit at a much lower level.
Thank you. Monsieur Leblanc?
No comment on it.
Thank you. Ms. Reid, following up with your response just now, I am instructed that in terms of the projects that were initiated during this program from 98 until 2003, only approximately 25 programs have sustained themselves beyond the government funding. Do you have any information that you can bring to this inquiry as to the extent to which there really is a legacy and where groups that were funded during the program are maintaining themselves through exterior funding?
So are you're talking specifically about stewardship groups or because when I talk about legacy, I'm talking about other benefits. So there was, mapping work that was done, there was capacity building that was...
No, I'm speaking of legacies in terms of groups that were formed and received their lifeline of funding from this program that then were able to secure outside funding to continue to the point that the public in British Columbia are benefiting from their initiatives to this very day, albeit without government funding.
So I don't have a specific number for you. I would agree, though, that with when the funding was removed, it had a significant impact on a large number of stewardship type groups that had sprung up, had been formed. There are some remaining, but not many. And I would say likely the ones that were, already in place or have other sources of funds. So yeah, but as far as the number goes, we may have that type of information at the department, but I don't have it at my
Yeah.
fingertips.
Do you mind attempting to secure that information and providing it to your council so that it could be brought before the inquiry?
So is this the specific question, how many stewardship groups which were created as a part of HCSP continue today?
That is correct.
Okay.
The next question, I have a feeling, is self-evident, but I think it should go on the record. Why has the Government of Canada, through DFO, failed to fund a stewardship program subsequent to 2003? Again, Mr. Wang, why don't we just go left to right, my left to right? And you may not be the best to answer this because you're on a local region and you may want to deflect it, and if so, maybe I should, in fact, if you don't mind, start with Monsieur Leblanc from headquarters.
It's very difficult to answer. This was a B-based, these were B-based funding, and they do sunset. And
So they do what? I didn't hear you.
They sunset, that is, they
Yes,
close off.
yes.
And from a broad perspective in terms of a national habitat program, these are very unique in this region. There are no such programs in any other parts of the country, in Atlantic Canada, Central Canada, or elsewhere.
Well, that's interesting. And just before going on to Ms. Reid, was it the opinion of headquarters in its post-mortem, in its review of this program, that it had been beneficial to the public interest?
I would say that these programs here that are listed have been beneficial in terms of increasing awareness, understanding, as well as in terms of the value of habitat, as well as engaging Canadians in the stewardship of fish habitat.
If indeed it was perceived by the federal government and by DFO that it was beneficial in the public interest, again, my question, why were these programs not renewed from 03 until the present?
You would have to ask someone other than myself, probably Cabinet, because the Cabinet makes decisions on these programs going forward. Treasury Board and what have you are the ones that are the gatekeepers for any future extension of any B-based programs.
All right. Well, I don't know the protocol about this. Maybe you're not able to speak to it. Has DFO been seeking funds from Treasury Board for a program to replace the program up till 2003?
Not that I'm aware of.
And you would be aware of that, would you not, in light of your position?
I should be.
Yes. Ms. Reid, turning to you on the same question, if you would respond to the question, was this program deemed beneficial, and if it was, why was it never renewed since 03?
Yes, I think that the program was deemed beneficial. The submission to Cabinet to get the funding was set out over a specific time period with intended objectives. It was never intended to be ongoing increase in our A-based funding. I think it was intended as an infusion of funds, build some capacity, get some work done, and then we need to reabsorb the activities into the business of the department. So the question is, why doesn't DFO get that extra bump of money in perpetuity is really a question, as Patrice has said, around Cabinet decisions and priorities and where we spend our money as a government.
Well, you being in the position you are at the region, has region been lobbying headquarters for a budgetary item to support a stewardship program much similar to what we know about from up to 2003?
We haven't specifically written, you wouldn't find a document specifically requesting, a new big B-based program per se, but certainly we do speak about the benefits of stewardship and try different ways to encourage and support funding of those types of activities on an ongoing basis.
Which are short of money.
But we're short of money.
Yes. I'll come back to the shortage of money. I want to move on. Monsieur Leblanc, You testified yesterday about the strategies 1 to 8 within the Habitat Policy Program, and you stated that the concentration has been on the first of the strategies. And in a will say, which was provided to all council, that is not in evidence, I want to put one sentence to you. If you can go to your will say. If it is, yes, thank you. And to page 2, you last bullet under Habitat Policy, he will say that the Habitat Policy contains 8 implementation strategies, and the DFO is primarily focused in efforts and resources on implementing the protection and compliance strategy, which is the foundation of the HMP's referral review process and practice, with limited efforts and resources directed at implementing the other 7 strategies. You adopt that, do you not?
Yes.
Yes. And so what we're left with there is that there has been, quote, limited effort and resources directed, unquote, at, for example, monitoring, which is the 8th of the strategies, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, again, it's maybe a self-evident answer, but can you tell me why that is the case? Is it a funding situation, again, that has led to this weak initiative on the monitoring side of the Habitat portfolio?
Our efforts over the years have been to deal with the workload in terms of regulatory reviews under the Fisheries Act, and that's the referral process, which we manage, as well as other workload related to, as we talked about, processes such as environmental assessment requirements, duty to consult with Aboriginal groups, and to deal with requirements under the Species at Risk Act. We have dedicated most of our resources to that effort, in many cases across Canada. I'm looking across Canada here. In the regions, each region is a little bit unique. There has been some limited effort, as I mentioned there, and resources that were directed at some of the other, and it's more in some areas. For example, in BC, you see a significant injection of funding on community-based stewardship, which would get into habitat improvement, public education and awareness, and some of the other strategies, but less so in other parts of the country.
Yes, and if I may go back to the document which I neglected to put in as an exhibit, this being the reality stewardship, survival of the fittest for community salmon groups. And if you go back to that same page that's right before your screen, there is a sentence in the 3rd paragraph I want to read to you in the context of monitoring, and it's mid-paragraph, and its sentence starts, "The most important kind of evaluation," I hope you are able to find that sentence midway through the 3rd paragraph, "the most important kind of evaluation, monitoring for effects on the ecosystem utilized by salmon, is almost non-existent." Would you agree, Monsieur Leblanc, that that is indeed an accurate statement as of 2004 and as of now, for that matter?
There is, I would agree that there is limited monitoring at the ecosystem level for the status of fish habitat.
Thank you.
Could I add something to that? My impression, and I've only read this piece quickly, is that it's suggesting that habitat restoration efforts that are undertaken are unevaluated, ad hoc, and perhaps low value. And I think that while the structure is somewhat limited in terms of what can be sort of produced as an evaluative document, that there is a fair amount of professional capacity in the background which does inform these kinds of things. And we have restoration biologists within the department, some of whom have spent careers doing this, and I would not undervalue their professional guidance and utility in terms of trying to direct restoration projects to things that are very likely to have biological value.
Yes. On restoration, let's go right to that for a moment.
You want to mark that as an exhibit?
Yes, and I do indeed.
Marked as exhibit number 664.
I've sat in this inquiry for months now. I'm not familiar with whether the federal government, let's say over the last 5 years, has actually initiated restoration programs on its own, as opposed to contracting out to other groups, NGOs, whatever. Is there a history, and I don't want to go into great detail, but is there a history of federal restoration programs within the Fraser watershed?
If I could just answer give an overall answer, and then Jason can get to the specifics about the Fraser.
Yes.
So as part of the Salmon Enhancement Program, $5 million a year is dedicated towards restoration. Now, for the most part, we have engineers and biologists who work in that program distributed across the region. For the most part, what those engineers and biologists try and do is lever resources. So they take the money that they have and they work with partners to try and increase the amount of bang for the buck, so to speak. And so through that technique, they estimate they lever about 1 in 5. So for every dollar they spend, they get about $5 back in restoration benefits. Now, to speak to the specifics of the Fraser, Jason can talk about that.
Just before going to Mr. Mang, then, this history of restoration by the federal government, would you say over the last 5 years it has had diminished impact, or it has been increased as a program?
Over the past 5 years, it has stabilized. Now, under the HCSP, I think there was probably additional money put into restoration type activities. So under that B-based program, there was more. But CEP has stabilized that amount at about $5 million a year.
And would you agree with me, $5 million is a drop in the bucket in terms of the needs for restoration of watershed within the Fraser Basin over the last 5 years?
Well, I would agree that $5 million, certainly we could spend a lot more money than that.
Thank you. Mr. Mang, did you want to say something?
I think Rebecca covered it pretty well. There's been a restoration program around, and for a while, we have staff that do that. They work very much in collaboration with external partners and get most of the project dollars from what I would generalize as third-party funding sources. And over the course of a number of years, a fair amount of activity is undertaken that I think has some positive benefit for salmon.
Thank you. I have a major topic to go into, but I don't want to break it up, so let me go to another issue. And we're going to be dealing with enforcement later this week. But you would agree with me, enforcement is very relevant to the management side of habitat because it puts teeth into the habitat program and hopefully is a deterrent in terms of individuals who might otherwise violate Section 3536 of the Fisheries Act. Would you agree with me, Mr. Hang?
Yes.
Yes. And being that, being the situation, and appreciating enforcement goes hand in hand with management in terms of your effectiveness as managers, I am informed, and I'll put this obviously more specifically to the panel on enforcement, that from the reports to Parliament by DFO, the number of convictions in 1997-98 were 24 convictions for Section 25, 24 convictions for Section 36. In fairness, you probably don't have those figures right before you, do you? And in terms of 98 to 99, 22 convictions for habitat, 13 convictions for pollution, accepting for a moment that this is proven out when I cross-examine the panel Friday and Monday. I am further informed that 2008 and 2009, there was only one conviction. Do you know that to be generally correct?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, I don't have the data in front of me that you're speaking to, and I'm not sure if you're talking about within the Fraser River, the Pacific region, the country. So I'm sure that we can gather the data in whatever frame you're looking for, but I don't have it before me.
All right. Rather than belaboring the issue, could I also put that on my wish list of information, unless it is going to come out in any event from the other panels?
I'm going to make a wish list.
I'm sorry?
Well, I have a wish list. Sounds like Mr. Rosenblum's got the data, so he can give it to me.
Well, I don't have it in document form. But I can get it in document form. I don't see why I should be the one putting it out, but
This issue can properly be deferred, I'll suggest, to the panel Thursday.
thank you. It's the hour. Thank you.
Hearing is now adjourned until 2 p.m.